Hey everyone, how's it going? This is the Bald Metal Nerd coming at you with another wonderful video. And in this one, I'm not going to talk about my unemployment situation, shockingly, or music. You already saw the title of this one. I'm going to be giving my overall thoughts and feelings on the first season of Star Trek Picard. Now, I know I'm pretty late on this as the season wrapped. I think a couple of months ago at this point. So let's get into it. And yes, there are going to be spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen it, you've been warned. So I guess I'll just start with my very broad opinion of the first season. I thought it was decent. You know, definitely a lot better than Star Trek Discovery, which is not very hard because I thought Discovery was an extremely poor show. So, hey, that's something, right? It beat Discovery. Very low bar cleared. That being said, I definitely had my issues with the show. Um, Having Patrick Stewart back, obviously, it was a privilege to see him playing the role of Picard again. That being said, the way they approached the character, I get what they were going for. They were going for somebody who is essentially in the waning years of his life, way past his prime. Uh, and I thought that was appropriate, for the first part of the season. The only disappointment I really felt with Picard's character through the rest of the season is I felt that as the season went on, he should have maybe started to become more of, quote, his old self. And what do I mean by his old self? Well, if you think about what do Star Trek fans love about the Picard character? As for me, what I really always liked about the Picard character is the fact that he is so basically, since he's a captain, well, not in this show, but previously, always very confident in every situation, very put together, um, can find the solution to pretty much anything. For lack of a better term, they're kind of like, Star Trek captains are sort of like superheroes. I mean, obviously not exactly the same, but very heroic characters, very competent, and a lot of the time in this show, it feels like he's kind of just stumbling through the situations that he's put in. Which, like I said, I think that would have been fine for some of it, but I think it would have been more satisfying for him to be, quote, more commanding than he was, because that's kind of what we're used to. I mean, we're just used to seeing Picard kind of in charge of everything, and I get what they're going for, and I realize they're trying to do a different approach with the character, but it would have been nice to see him more, at least towards the end of the season, have him more like he was on the show. But I do understand what they were doing. That being said, obviously Patrick Stewart does a great job portraying the character again. I mean, there's obviously no complaints about the way he's playing his role, right? So there's that. Now I'm going to talk about the parts of the story that I had problems with, right? Um, so you know, obviously the Romulans possess a Borg cube, right? Okay, fine. And I guess that's somewhat believable, and they're obviously, I guess they're mining this Borg cube for technologies or whatever, right? And they're mining former Borg drones for their technology or whatever. And I get that. I get why they have the Borg cube. Okay, and for most of the season, the Borg cube is inert or turned off or whatever, right? And the whole time I'm watching the show, the whole season, I'm thinking to myself, well, they have a Borg cube. When is the collective going to show up? Right? I just kept thinking to myself, the Borg collective is likely at some point to just kind of show up and cause a whole lot of trouble. And in the last couple of, I think the last 2 episodes of the season, 7 of 9, well, she's around before that. I mean, she shows up, I don't know, about halfway through the season or so. But in the last couple of episodes, 7 of 9 actually reactivates the cube, right? I mean, that sucker gets powered up. She essentially just reactivates the fucking thing, reestablishes like a Borg collective on the cube, right? And you never hear any inklings of the collective. Now, at the end of Voyager, it's not clear if the Borg are wiped out, but I don't think that they were. Because obviously, if you're a Star Trek fan, you've seen Endgame where they deal that major blow to the Borg, but that doesn't mean the Borg doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, they hurt them, but they don't wipe them out, right? So, and if anyone has watched Star Trek for any amount of time, you know that the Borg can detect the activation of Borg technology, right? Across vast distances, since they're the Borg collective. You would think that a cube getting fired up in the establishment of a collective on the cube would send messages to the Borg, right? You'd think they'd be like, they'd be like, grid 8, spatial grid 85728, cube, power on, detected, investigate, something like that would go through the collective, right? And they would send some ships to kind of see what was going on, but that's not indicated that ever happens. It's like the cube gets powered on, then they go to the planet with the androids on it, and then the cube crashes and is turned off. I didn't like that. I felt the Borg should have been, instead of the threat being what it was with, the androids maybe summoning the evil space worms to wipe out organic life, I think it would have been better if the Borg had been the threat again rather than what they did. Because truthfully, I felt who the main adversary was of the group of androids, some of the androids being evil or whatever and wanting to bring about the end of organic life. It was just it was lame. It was not well done, especially with the Romulan secret society of we have to stop androids. Okay, fine. But again, it just wasn't well done. The story, I felt, was weak in that regard. Just not very well done at all. And part of the problem is they didn't really explain anything. I mean, they didn't. You show a Borg cube, right? You should at least talk about what's going on with the Borg, like why you can have this thing and it's not an extreme threat to the galaxy, But they don't even address it. It's never talked about. The whole movie the whole series just plays like a really long action movie that's very light on explanations and just heavy on, propelling the plot forward such as it is and leaving lots and lots and lots of holes, right? So that's something that greatly irritated me about it. That probably is what irritated me the second most. It's not the thing that irritated me the most. I will get to the thing that irritated me the most here in a bit, but that was probably the thing that pissed me off, the second most, right? Um, Now I'm going to say something positive about the show. As far as the new character goes, Raffi, Rios, oh God, the Romulan space like the Romulan sword kid. I can't whose name escapes me at the moment. Elnor, I think was his name. All of those new characters. Um, the crazy woman who killed Maddox. All of them were fairly likable, actually. There wasn't a Michael Burnham among them. They were all fairly good characters, enjoyable to watch. I could see them growing into their own over the course of a few seasons. I mean, none of them did I feel were like truly outstanding, but they were all pretty good. The only new characters that I thought were kind of lame were the Romulan villains. The brother and sister team whose names I can't even remember. That's how memorable they are. I mean, I just thought they were very bland and generic villains and just not really fun to watch. But the quote good guys, they were fine. They were all relatively enjoyable. But the villains were they were crap for the most part. So there's that. The overall plot, the storyline was okay. I of course really enjoyed the episode where they spent basically the whole time with Troy and Riker. That was quite good, and because of course what most fans want is more or less a TNG reunion show, but obviously that's not what we're getting. But it was enjoyable, and I did like the way they involved Brent Spiner as well. I did like the dream sequences with Data were all enjoyable. Brent Spiner playing Dr. Soon's son was also enjoyable. So definitely good stuff there. As far as Dodge goes, um, which was of course the main android, the sister who survived. Because was that the one who got killed? Jeez. See, I can't even remember the names. This just shows you how much of an impact these characters made on me. The new main character, the female android, an okay character. Not terrible, but I felt she was a fairly weak character. Okay, but nothing spectacular. So that's another issue I had with the show. I am glad they brought back Seven of Nine, obviously. I mean, because she's fantastic. I was also extremely happy to see Hugh as well. Unfortunately, they killed him off, which kind of sucks because, truthfully, I would have liked to see him be much more of a recurring character as well. But whatever it is, what it is, at least Seven is now part of the main cast and crew, so she'll be pretty much involved with season 2, which is a good thing. So yeah, I mean, overall, a decent first season, very very decent, fairly good overall. Now I'm going to talk about the thing that just really pissed me off more than anything else and infuriated the shit out of me. This what I'm about to talk about, it just really 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 made me mad. In the last episode of the show, of the first season, Picard dies from his You know, if you guys, again, everyone has probably seen the finale of Next Generation where Picard travels to the future and he has this brain disorder. And they talk about how it can kill him and all that. Well, in this show, he dies from his brain disorder when he's, you know, trying to talk to the android to convince her not to unleash the tentacle monsters to wipe out organic life. At that point, he's, you know, giving her a bit of a monologue speech, and after that, that's when he dies, right? And then he wakes up, his soul, consciousness, whatever, is in a computer simulation with Data's soul or consciousness, right? And he's having a discussion with Data, and you know, basically, it's decided that Picard is going to be leaving the simulation soon. Because he's going to wake up in another body, which I'm about to talk about. And Data asks Picard, Data says, hey, you know, he asks for him to discontinue the simulation so Data can die and his life can have meaning. Okay, fine. So if that in and of itself wouldn't make me mad if it wasn't for the fact that what saves Picard's life is he wakes up in an android body that's basically the same as his old one. He doesn't really have the superpowers of an android. He doesn't have super strength, super speed, super smarts, any of that stuff. It's very convenient. They're like, oh, here you go. Here's an android body, but you're basically just an old man still. The only change they supposedly made is he no longer has that brain disorder that'll kill him, right? And so essentially, he wakes up, he ends the simulation, and Data dies, right? And then they warp off in their ship, and they talk, you know, get ready for season 2. The thing that really pissed me off, I mean, beyond belief about this, they had Data in this computer program for, I guess, decades, since, you know, this takes place maybe 20 years after Star Trek Nemesis when Data died. They had his consciousness in this thing, I guess, since then. They were on a planet that had a lab that could build android bodies, right? At any point over the last 20 years, they could have essentially downloaded Data's soul/consciousness into a new android body, and Data could have woken up and been like, well, you know, he basically could have went on with his existence at that point. Data could have he could have came right back, right? Okay, so maybe the explanation is, I don't know, maybe there was some technological thing that prevented them from doing it before, but with the, because I do remember in the episode them talking about some technological breakthrough that allowed them to put Picard into the android body. Okay, so fine. So I guess maybe if they don't put him back for 20 years, whatever. Maybe it's they needed to have that technological breakthrough. They put Picard in a body. But at that point, once that happens, why couldn't they do the same thing with Data, right? If they could do it with Picard, why couldn't they do it with Data? Why couldn't they just essentially make an android body for Data and then download Data into that android body, and then Data could have woken up and could have said something, you know, it would have been incredible if Data had woken up and said, that was a very interesting experience, Captain. It's excellent to see you again, or something along those lines, right? And then Data could have, you know, then went along for the adventures for season 2. That would have been a, you know, much preferred outcome for me. I mean, I think any Star Trek fan would be incredibly what's the word I'm looking for? Enthusiastic about that outcome, right? Because in my opinion, they very needlessly killed off Data. There was no reason to do it at all. Like, His death made, even by Star Trek standards, it made zero sense. Because, okay, his death in Nemesis, he basically sacrificed himself to save Picard and the Enterprise. Basically, like Spock did at the end of, the Wrath of Khan. Essentially, Data did the same thing at the end of Nemesis. Fine. They brought Spock back. They could have easily done the same thing for Data, and with it just didn't make sense, and it just really, really, really pissed me off beyond belief, and that is my biggest gripe with the show. Again, overall, I think it's decent, and it is worth watching if you are a Star Trek fan, but it is disappointing on some levels. So, that's basically it on my thoughts and feelings for Picard Season 1. I am more or less looking forward to Season 2. I mean, I'm not like, losing sleep over it or anything, because it took me 2 damn months to do this review. So obviously it's not something that's keeping me up. But really what inspired me to even make this video, I was actually talking to a friend of mine who just figured out that I'm a Star Trek fan after knowing me for 20 years, ironically. And he hadn't seen Picard, and we just were talking about it. So, I just was like, I thought about it, and I was like, what do I like about Picard? What do I hate about Picard? And then I just decided to make this video. So that's basically it. I really hope you guys liked this bit of a departure. So anyway, that's it. As always, live long and prosper. Keep on rocking. See you guys next time.